It was a bright morning at the city airport. The sun was shining, and the airport was full of travelers, some excited, some tired. Among them was a man named Mr. Jordan. He walked slowly through the airport, wearing a plain black jacket, jeans, and simple shoes. He looked like any other middle-aged man. Nothing expensive, nothing loud. He carried just one small black bag. No one noticed him. No one stopped him, and that's how he liked it. Mr. Jordan walked to the business class lounge, gave a soft smile to the receptionist, and handed over his first-class boarding pass. She looked at it quickly, nodded, and waved him in. He thanked her politely and walked toward the gate. At the gate, passengers were getting ready to board. The airline staff called, "First class and VIP passengers, please come forward." Mr. Jordan stepped into the line. Behind him was a man in a fancy suit, wearing sunglasses indoors and holding a gold-covered phone. He looked annoyed just by standing in line. Soon, the doors opened. Mr. Jordan entered the plane and walked calmly towards seat 1A, a window seat in the first-class section. But as he reached it, he stopped. Someone was already sitting there. A white man with sharp features, expensive clothes, and a loud laugh. He was sipping orange juice and talking on the phone. Mr. Jordan looked at his boarding pass again, then at the seat. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I think this is my seat." The man didn't even look at him. "No, it's taken," he said casually. Mr. Jordan stayed calm. "I have a boarding pass for 1A. Maybe there's a mistake." Now the man looked at him, up and down, then smirked. "You sure you're in the right section? Maybe try economy." Mr. Jordan didn't respond right away. His eyes were still calm, but there was a small pause in his breath. He turned toward the flight attendant who was nearby. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. "I believe there is a seating issue here." The flight attendant walked over, looked at Mr. Jordan, then the white man. She hesitated for a second. Then she smiled awkwardly and said, "Sir, would you mind taking another seat? This gentleman is already comfortable here. It's just a short flight." Mr. Jordan was surprised, but he didn't argue. He looked at the crew, then at the man who had stolen his seat, then back at his ticket. Still calm, he simply said, "Are you sure about this?" The flight attendant nodded, trying to smile. Mr. Jordan gave a small, slow smile. "All right then," he said quietly, "but remember this moment." He turned around, walked past the first-class section, past business class, and into economy. No one noticed. No one followed. He found an empty seat near the back of the plane and sat down silently. The white man in seat 1A laughed again and took another sip of juice. The plane took off. The crew walked up and down the aisles, smiling at some, ignoring others. Mr. Jordan looked out the window, quiet. A little boy sitting beside him asked, "Mister, why are you sitting here? You don't look like you belong here." Mr. Jordan smiled. "I'm just like everyone else, son." The boy nodded and looked out the window too. No one knew who Mr. Jordan really was. No one knew that the man sitting quietly in economy class owned 51% of the airline. No one knew that the VIP seat, the one taken from him, had his name on it not just as a passenger, but as the owner. And no one knew what was coming next. But he knew. And he waited, silently, for the plane to land. The plane had landed. Passengers began standing, collecting their bags, and preparing to leave. Mr. Jordan waited quietly in his seat, letting others go first. No one offered him space. No one said thank you. No one noticed the calm, quiet man sitting near the back of the plane. As he stepped out of the aircraft and walked into the airport terminal, the crew didn't say goodbye to him. They smiled at the VIP passenger in seat 1A. They even offered him a ride on a small airport cart. Mr. Jordan walked alone. He didn't look back. A look into his past. Who was this man? Mr. Jordan's story began far from the luxury airports and first-class seats of today. He was born in a small town, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. Their house had no heat in winter and no cooling in summer. Sometimes, there wasn't even enough food on the table. As a child, he used to sell newspapers on the street corner before school. At night, he would clean shoes outside a bus station. Every penny he earned went to help his mother. He never complained. He just worked. When he turned 18, he applied for a job at an airport. He didn't get it. The manager said, "We don't think you fit the look." He knew what that meant, but he didn't argue. He just smiled, walked out, and made a decision. One day, I'll own something bigger than this airport. The rise of Mr. Jordan. He studied at night, worked during the day, and saved every dollar. After years of hard work, he opened a small travel agency in a tiny office. At first, no one came. But slowly, people started noticing his honesty, his service, his respect for every customer. That agency grew. He invested wisely, bought shares in airlines, met business leaders. He spoke softly, but when he spoke, people listened. By the time he was 40, he owned a chain of travel companies. By 45, he had bought shares in a struggling airline. By 50, he became majority owner of one of the biggest airline companies in the country. But still, he wore the same simple clothes, drove the same old car, flew economy or business class, never first class unless it was needed. He believed true power didn't shout, it listened, it watched, and it waited. Why he chose that flight? The flight he took that morning wasn't random. He had received complaints about the airline's staff on that route, stories about rude behavior, racism, and poor service. So Mr. Jordan made a quiet decision. He booked the flight under a regular name. No assistant, no VIP alerts, no special requests. He wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. And what he saw broke his heart. A man of respect. Mr. Jordan never believed in shouting or firing people in public. He believed in giving people a chance to show who they really were. But on that flight, the crew had shown him something ugly. They didn't just disrespect a customer. They disrespected a human being. Not because he was loud, not because he caused problems, but because he looked different, because he didn't wear a suit, because he didn't act like he was rich. They didn't know they had just tested the patience of the man who signed their paychecks. Silence before the storm. Back in his office, Mr. Jordan sat at his desk. He placed his phone down, replayed the video. The moment the crew ignored him, the moment the white man laughed, the moment the flight attendant smiled and said, "It's just a short flight." He didn't look angry. He looked tired. Tired of the same game. Tired of seeing people in power forget basic respect. He called his assistant. "Set up a board meeting," he said calmly, "tomorrow morning, and alert HR. We're going to make some changes." No one knew yet. The flight crew was still unaware. The white man in seat 1A was still proud of himself, telling his friends how he put a poor guy in his place. But the truth was rising like a quiet storm. The owner of the airline had seen everything, heard everything, felt everything. And now, he was ready to act. The next day, the same flight route was scheduled again. Same airline, same staff, different passengers. But something had changed. That morning, the flight crew arrived as usual, chatting and laughing in the crew room. They talked about the previous day's flight. One of them joked, "Remember that guy we moved to economy? The one who thought he was first class. Poor guy must have gotten lost." They laughed. The senior flight attendant, Karen, smiled proudly. "You have to know who's real VIP and who's just pretending," she said, sipping her coffee. None of them knew. They didn't know their every word had been recorded. They didn't know a board meeting was about to happen, with their names on the agenda. And they didn't know the man they had treated badly was the airline's majority owner. Meanwhile, in the sky, Another flight, another group of passengers. But in many ways, it was the same. The same attitude, the same cold smiles, the same judgmental looks. A young black couple asked for a blanket. The attendant rolled her eyes and said, "Only for business class." A woman in hijab was told, "Please step aside for a second check," even though others walked by without a problem. Mr. Jordan wasn't on this flight, but someone else was. A secret internal inspector, sent directly by him. She sat quietly, dressed like a regular passenger, but she saw everything. She took notes. She recorded every word, every attitude, every small injustice that happened on board. The arrogance continues. Back at the airline headquarters, the white man who had taken Mr. Jordan's seat was in the lounge, bragging loudly to a group of friends. "I was in 1A, yeah. Some guy thought he could take my seat. I told him, 'Go to the back, man.' You should have seen his face." His friends laughed. "He looked so out of place." Another added, "Dressed like a delivery guy." They all laughed again. A woman nearby overheard them and whispered to her friend, "Some people just have no heart." But the man didn't care. He was used to power. He believed respect was only for people who looked powerful. A meeting begins. At 9 a.m. sharp, Mr. Jordan entered the boardroom. No jacket, no tie, just the same quiet presence. The directors stood up as he entered. Everyone could feel something serious was about to happen. Mr. Jordan placed his phone on the table. Without saying a word, he pressed play. The room was silent. The audio began. "You sure you're in the right section? Just take another seat. This gentleman is already comfortable here." Then came the laughter, the mocking. The video showed the white man sipping juice in Mr. Jordan's seat. And finally, it showed Mr. Jordan, calm, quiet, walking to the back of the plane without a single complaint. One director covered his mouth. Another shook his head. The CEO lowered his eyes in shame. When the video ended, Mr. Jordan looked around the table and finally spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what our airline has become. Not just about one seat. This isn't just about a seat," Mr. Jordan continued. "This is about respect, about how we treat people who look different, speak different, or dress different." He paused. "I was ignored. I was insulted. But more than that, I watched how your crew treated many others, not just me. And it's not acceptable." One board member asked, "Sir, what action would you like to take?" Mr. Jordan didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He simply said, "Fire them. All of them." Shock and silence. The room went silent. Someone whispered, "All of them." "Yes," Mr. Jordan said. "Every person involved in that flight, from the gate agents to the in-flight staff. If they can't respect passengers when they don't recognize them as rich or powerful, then they don't belong here." The CEO nodded slowly. "It will be done." Behind the calm, Mr. Jordan walked out of the meeting with the same quiet steps he walked onto the plane with. But inside him was fire. He didn't want revenge. He wanted change. Real change. Not just for himself, but for the thousands of people who take flights every day and are treated differently just because of how they look, speak, or dress. Meanwhile, the crew was still smiling. Back at the airport, the same crew prepared for their next flight. They were unaware. They were still laughing, still thinking nothing had happened. But just as they lined up near the boarding gate, a manager walked up, holding a folder. He cleared his throat. "Karen, John, Lisa, Marcus, please come with me. Now." They looked confused. "Is there a problem?" Karen asked. The manager didn't answer, just looked at them. Cold, quiet, and serious. The hallway was silent as the crew followed the manager. Their shoes echoed on the tiled floor. No one spoke, not even Karen, who was usually full of jokes. They walked past the staff lounge, past the check-in counters, and finally stopped outside a quiet meeting room. The blinds were closed. The door was half open. Inside, a group of people waited: HR officers, a legal advisor, and someone none of the crew had ever seen before. A woman in a black blazer stepped forward. "Please," she said calmly, "take a seat." Karen looked at the others. "What's going on?" she asked, forcing a nervous smile. No one answered. She sat down. The others followed. Then the woman placed a folder on the table, opened it, and said something that sent chills down their spines. "You are all here because of what happened on Flight 273 yesterday." The moment everything changed. The crew exchanged confused looks. "Is this about that mix-up in seat numbers?" asked Marcus, the young flight attendant. The woman looked directly at him. "This is not about a mix-up. This is about your behavior, your words, your choices." Then she pressed a button on a small remote, and the projector lit up. A video began playing. It showed Mr. Jordan walking onto the flight. Calm, polite, patient. Then came the moment that changed everything: the seat being refused, the sarcastic comments, the laughter. The moment the flight attendant told him to just sit somewhere else. The room fell silent. No one moved. Karen's face turned pale. Lisa put a hand over her mouth. John, the gate agent, looked away in shame. A shocking realization. Then the woman spoke again. "The man you disrespected is not just a first-class passenger. He is Mr. Malcolm Jordan, the majority owner of this airline." Karen's heart skipped a beat. John gasped. "What?" Lisa whispered, "That's not possible." The woman continued. "He booked the ticket under a regular name. No title, no alerts. He was testing the system, and testing you. And you failed. Consequences." One by one, the woman listed their names, their roles on the flight, and their actions. Karen, for ignoring the boarding pass and brushing him off. John, for smiling at the man in 1A, but turning cold to Mr. Jordan. Lisa, for defending the VIP passenger who didn't even have the correct seat. Marcus, for joining in the quiet laughs and saying nothing. "You may think you were just doing your job," she said, "but your job is to treat every passenger with dignity." Then she handed each of them an envelope. Inside was a letter. Each one read, "Termination of employment. Effective immediately." Karen stared at the letter. Her hands shook. "I've worked here for 9 years." Lisa began to cry softly. "This can't be happening." But the woman didn't flinch. "This decision came directly from Mr. Jordan," she said, "and it's final." A humbling walk. Security escorted the crew to collect their things. It wasn't dramatic. No handcuffs, no shouting. Just quiet footsteps and heavy hearts. As Karen packed her things, she looked around the crew room that once felt like her second home. Everything seemed smaller now. Marcus sat on a bench outside, staring at the floor. Lisa hugged a fellow attendant and whispered, "I wish I had said something. I wish I had done better." But it was too late. Meanwhile, in the owner's office, Mr. Jordan sat at his desk, watching the news quietly. The airline's official statement had just gone live. "We do not tolerate discrimination or disrespect of any kind. Every passenger matters. We are making changes. Real ones. Starting now." He turned off the screen. There was no joy on his face. No victory. He didn't like firing people. But he knew something important. If you let one moment of disrespect go unpunished, it becomes a habit, a culture. And he was going to change that. Not just for himself, but for every passenger who ever felt invisible. A visit from someone unexpected. Later that afternoon, Mr. Jordan's secretary knocked on his door. "Sir, there's someone here to see you." He looked up. "Who is it?" "It's the man from seat 1A. Mr. Jordan raised his eyebrow. "Send him in." The door opened, and the white man walked in, No sunglasses this time, no confident smile. He looked nervous. "I just found out who you are," he said. I didn't know. If I had known." Mr. Jordan raised a hand, gently stopping him. "That's the problem," he said. "You would have treated me better if you knew who I was." The man fell silent. Mr. Jordan leaned forward. "You don't respect people. You respect power. And that is not the same." The man had no reply. He quietly nodded and left the office. A new policy. That evening, Mr. Jordan announced a new rule for the airline. All staff must now go through a fresh training program. Every employee, no matter how high, must fly one random route per month as a regular passenger. And all passengers, regardless of ticket class, must be treated with the same respect. The slogan was updated too. "Every seat deserves respect." News spread like fire. Every major news outlet picked up the story. Airline owner disguises himself as regular passenger, fires entire crew after mistreatment. People couldn't stop talking about it. Social media was filled with clips from the leaked video. Tweets, TikToks, and headlines were everywhere. Some called Mr. Jordan a hero. Some were shocked that the staff didn't recognize him. But most felt seen. Finally, someone had stood up for the people who are usually ignored. The industry reacts. Other airline companies started to panic. "We need to train our staff better," said one airline CEO during a press conference. "We're reviewing our passenger treatment policies," said another. But Mr. Jordan didn't want fake promises. He wanted real, deep change. He didn't want the story to be about revenge. He wanted it to be about respect. So he held a press event, not in a big hotel, but in a local school gym. He stood on a small stage and said, "This is not about one seat. This is about the millions of people who feel disrespected every day because of how they look, where they're from, or how much money they have." The crowd clapped. "Kindness," he said, "should never be reserved for those we think are rich." A new generation. Inside the airline, things began to change. New hires were trained with a new mindset. No class-based favoritism. No judging by appearance. No tolerance for hidden discrimination. Each employee had to watch the full video of what happened on Flight 273. They were asked one question afterward. If you were on that flight, what would you have done? Some cried during the video. Some stayed silent. But all of them understood one thing clearly. This job wasn't just about serving drinks or punching tickets. It was about serving people with dignity. Meet Sarah. One of the new hires was a young woman named Sarah. She came from a small village. She had always dreamed of becoming a flight attendant, but was rejected 3 times before. This time, she made it. On her first day, she was nervous. Her hands were shaking as she handed water to a tired passenger. But the woman smiled at her and said, "You're doing great." That one sentence gave Sarah the confidence to smile back, to stand tall, to walk down the aisle with kindness in her heart. And when a man in old clothes stepped onto the plane and sat in business class by mistake, she didn't scold him. She gently checked his ticket and offered to help him find the correct seat. Then, before leaving, she offered him a pillow for the long flight. Why? Because she remembered the video. She remembered Mr. Jordan's story. And she wanted to be different. A surprise visit. A few weeks later, on a rainy morning, Mr. Jordan arrived at the airport. No one knew he was coming. He wore simple clothes again. No announcement, no assistance, just a quiet check-in and a small carry-on bag. This time, as he approached the gate, a young agent greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you?" Mr. Jordan nodded. "Just checking in for Flight 402. She looked at his ticket and said, "Thank you for flying with us today." As he walked away, she didn't recognize who he was. And yet, she still showed respect. That meant more to Mr. Jordan than any apology. Changing more than just an airline, Other companies began following Mr. Jordan's example. A coffee chain changed its training program. A hotel group launched an anti-discrimination campaign. Even a popular rideshare app updated its policies for how drivers and riders treat one another. Because the lesson was clear. You never know who you're talking to, but you always know how you should treat them. Mr. Jordan's final statement. In a heartfelt letter posted on the airline's website, Mr. Jordan wrote, "I was once the boy who had to sit at the back. Today, I own the plane. But the power isn't in owning the seat. The power is in never becoming like those who once looked down on me." He signed it. M. Jordan, passenger first, CEO second. Weeks passed since Mr. Jordan's story became global news. The airline had changed. The crew was new. The policies were strict. People said, that kind of mistake can never happen again. But life has a way of testing the truth when no one is watching. A new morning, a new flight. It was a calm Tuesday morning. Flight 118 to Paris was on schedule. The crew stood neatly at the gate, smiling and welcoming passengers. They looked perfect. Uniforms pressed, shoes polished, greetings polite. Inside the terminal, a man slowly walked toward the gate. He wore old brown shoes and carried a plastic shopping bag instead of luggage. His coat was too big for him. His hair was messy. Some passengers stared. Some whispered, "Is he lost?" But he showed his ticket at the gate confidently. Business class, seat 2C. First impressions. The gate agent paused. She looked at the man, then at the ticket. Her face stayed neutral, but something inside her hesitated. "Business class?" she asked politely. "Yes," he said, in a soft voice. "Is there a problem?" She quickly shook her head. No, please, right this way." She remembered the new rule, never judge. But her eyes still followed him as he walked through the jet bridge. She wasn't the only one watching. A businessman sitting nearby whispered to his colleague, "That guy's in business. Must be a mistake." The colleague laughed. Maybe he found that ticket on the street. A young crew faces its first real test. Inside the plane, the new crew welcomed him. Sarah, the same young flight attendant from before, greeted him warmly. "Good morning, sir. Let me help you with your seat." She didn't look at his shoes. She didn't look at his coat. She looked at his eyes and saw someone who deserved respect. She offered him orange juice and a menu. She even helped him place his bag safely. But not everyone was as kind. Whispers in the cabin. A woman in seat 2A frowned. She called Sarah quietly and asked, "Are you sure that man is supposed to sit here?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, ma'am. He has a business class ticket." The woman rolled her eyes. "I'm just saying, it doesn't look like it." Sarah smiled politely and said nothing. But inside, she felt a tightness in her chest. These were the moments that tested everything. Not when cameras were rolling. Not when the CEO was watching. But when real passengers questioned what respect looks like. The mysterious passenger. The old man in seat 2C sat quietly. He sipped his juice. He smiled when the flight attendant brought him headphones. He thanked everyone softly. But no one knew who he really was. No one knew that he was Mr. Jordan's mentor. Mr. Elijah Brooks, the man who once gave a hungry young boy a job at a bus station. The man who believed in kindness when no one else did. Mr. Jordan had asked him for a favor. "Take one of our flights. Sit in business class. Don't tell them who you are. Just observe." Mr. Brooks had agreed, but only under one condition. "I'm not there to test your crew. I'm there to remind people that dignity has no dress code." A rude passenger crosses the line. Mid-flight, the businessman in seat 3B got up and walked toward Mr. Brooks. He leaned over and whispered, "Hey, just curious. Where'd you get that ticket?" Mr. Brooks looked up slowly. "I bought it." The man chuckled. "Must have been on discount day, huh?" Sarah, who was nearby, stepped in quickly. "Sir, Please return to your seat." The man looked annoyed. "I'm just talking." "Sir," Sarah said, firm but polite, "we treat every passenger with respect. Please don't speak to others this way." There was a pause. Then, slowly, the man walked back to his seat. Sarah's hands were shaking, but she stood tall. Mr. Brooks looked at her and smiled. "You handled that well," he said. A quiet landing, a loud message. When the plane landed in Paris, Mr. Brooks waited until all passengers left. Then he walked up to Sarah and the crew. He shook their hands one by one. "You may not know who I am," he said, "but today, you passed a test you didn't even know you were taking." Sarah looked surprised. "What do you mean, sir?" He smiled gently. "I came to see if kindness lies here now." And it does. Then he handed her a small envelope and walked away. Inside the envelope, when Sarah opened it, her eyes filled with tears. It was a handwritten note. "True respect is when you're kind to someone who can do nothing for you. Elijah Brooks." And with it, a first-class upgrade voucher, with her name on it. From Mr. Jordan himself. Cliffhanger ending. The story of Mr. Jordan had started a wave of change. But now, others were carrying that wave forward. Because the true test of character isn't when you serve the powerful. It's when you serve the silent, with the same heart. And soon, someone else would be watching. Even higher than first class. Months had passed since the world first heard the story of Mr. Jordan and the seat that changed everything. People had learned. Airlines had changed. A new standard had been set. But for Mr. Jordan, something still didn't feel finished. He had fixed the company. He had trained the staff. He had rewarded those who showed respect. Yet deep inside, he still carried a weight from the past. Not just from that flight, but from all the times in life he had been made to feel invisible. And now, he was ready to do something greater than fire people or change policies. He was ready to give back. A letter from his past. One morning, while reading old papers in his office, Mr. Jordan found an old faded envelope. It was from a woman named Miss Clara, his old schoolteacher, the one who believed in him when he had no money, no shoes, and no friends. Inside the envelope was a note. "If you ever succeed in life, don't forget the others still sitting in the back of the room." He stared at those words for a long time. And that day, he made a decision that would shock the world. The announcement. Mr. Jordan booked a press conference, but this time, not at an airport. He stood outside a small public school in the same neighborhood where he once grew up. Camera crews gathered. Reporters held microphones. The world waited. Then, with a calm voice, he spoke. "I am donating 40% of my company shares to create a scholarship fund. Not for the top students, but for the kids no one notices." Gasps filled the crowd. "This is for the ones who sit alone at lunch. The ones who wear torn shoes. The ones who have dreams but no chances." He smiled and added, "Because true first class is lifting others up." A special flight. A week later, something incredible happened. The airline launched its first ever Dignity flight, a flight where all seats were the same. No first class, no economy. Everyone got the same meal, same seat space, same welcome. It was full of students, janitors, single moms, retired teachers, people who had never flown before. And sitting quietly in the back row was Mr. Jordan himself. A little boy walked past him and said, "Sir, why are you sitting in the back?" Mr. Jordan smiled and replied, "Because that's where I started. And I never want to forget it." The return of the crew. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening behind the scenes. Karen, the former senior flight attendant who had been fired, wrote a public apology. Not just to Mr. Jordan, but to every passenger she had ever ignored. She started volunteering at a homeless shelter. Lisa, the gate agent, began helping train young airline staff in empathy and nonverbal respect. Even Marcus started a podcast called The Back Row, where everyday people shared stories of being overlooked. Mr. Jordan didn't rehire them, but he invited them to the next Dignity flight as guests of honor, because he believed in second chances when they were truly earned. The world feels it. Across the globe, the story reached new hearts. In Africa, a school was named after Mr. Jordan. In India, a taxi company started giving medals to drivers who showed kindness to customers in need. In Brazil, a restaurant made a policy to feed one homeless person for every 10 paying customers. The ripple effect had begun. All because of one man, one seat, one silent moment of disrespect, and one loud act of change. Full circle. Late one night, Mr. Jordan visited the old bus stop where he used to sleep. It was still there. Worn down, faded paint, same cold bench. He sat down, looking up at the stars. Then he heard a voice beside him. A teenage boy was sitting a few feet away. Thin jacket, tired eyes. They nodded at each other. Mr. Jordan pulled out a wrapped sandwich from his bag and handed it over. The boy looked surprised. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Mr. Jordan smiled gently. "Because someone once helped me when no one else did." And that moment changed everything. Years passed. The world remembered Mr. Jordan's story like a modern legend. His airline became one of the most respected in the world, not because of luxury, but because of how it treated people. Children studied his story in schools. Leadership seminars used it as a case study. But for Mr. Jordan, the journey wasn't over. He had one last flight to take and one last lesson to teach. Mr. Jordan in retirement. He lived quietly now. No suits, no office, no staff. Just a simple house, books on kindness, and letters from people who said, "You changed how I treat others." He often visited the school he funded and told students, "The world will respect you if you first respect the world." But one day, something unexpected arrived. A letter with no name on it. Inside, a small note. "You once sat in the back. Now I sit in the back, hoping someone like you will notice me." Attached was a hand-drawn map. It pointed to a small village near the edge of the country. No return address, no name, just a story waiting to be discovered. The journey begins. Mr. Jordan, now in his 60s, packed a small bag and took the trip. No private jet, no media, just a local bus, a notebook, and a desire to find out who sent the letter. After 8 hours of travel, he arrived at a quiet place. No airport, no taxis, just dirt roads and kind eyes. He asked around. An old man pointed to a nearby orphanage. "A girl named Amira lives there," the man said. "She writes letters to people she admires. She's quiet, sits in the back." Mr. Jordan smiled. Of course she did. Meeting Amira. At the orphanage, he met a 13-year-old girl with bright eyes and a calm voice. She wore worn shoes and sat by the window, sketching airplanes. He walked up to her gently and said, "You sent the letter." She nodded shyly. "I saw your story on a classroom TV. Everyone talked about your power. But I liked your pain more." He sat beside her, moved by her honesty. "You liked my pain?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Because I know what it feels like. To be the last one picked. To be told you don't belong in the front. The gift that changed a life." Without a word, Mr. Jordan opened his notebook. Inside, he pulled out a golden boarding pass. Not real gold, but symbolic. He handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. He replied, "This is a one-way ticket to your future. Not to sit in first class, but to one day lead it." He had created a new program called the Invisible First Class, scholarships for those who had never been noticed. Amira would be its first student. She cried, not because she got something, but because someone saw her. The movement lives on. The Invisible First Class program launched in 15 countries. It gave school uniforms to kids. It trained teenagers in kindness-based leadership. It helped single mothers start businesses. But most of all, it reminded the world of something simple. You don't need a fancy suit to sit in the front row of humanity. You just need a heart that sees others.